so much for joining us today. Before we kick this off, I do want to point out to the audience that we welcome questions. So please post them in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen during today's discussion, and we'll address those at the conclusion. So I'd now like to turn this over to Stephen Saltzstein, Forest Family Office's CEO.
Thank you, Callie, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm honored to have Terrence Wall, who is one of the great developers in the U.S. and especially in the Midwest and the Wisconsin area. It's going to be such a great discussion to see the world through his experience and how he's gotten to be so accomplished in real estate. So, Terrence, to start out with, how did you get started in this business?
Sure. Well, I got interested in real estate from my dad had introduced me to Professor Graskamp, really the famous, preeminent professor for real estate in the country, who has since passed away. But and I got interested and I got into the program. When I was in college, I actually bought a 48-unit apartment building. It was full of drug dealers and problem people, and I had to clean it up. Got a lot of death threats, and fix it up, turn it around, re-tenant it. And I did all that in college. Used to take calls on a cell phone in class. That was in the start of when cell phones came out. So the professors thought it was hilarious, and they would stop the lecturing. If I got a call in the middle of their lecture, they would stop and allow me to take the call in front of the entire class.
That's funny. Oh, really? That's funny.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They'd, listen to me set up the appointment for leasing, and they thought it was a hoot. So I bought that 48 unit, and I learned a lot. It's kind of like the property of hard knocks. You learn very quickly, when you have a rough tenant group,
right, and
how to turn it around, how to get good tenants in there who pay the rent, et cetera, fix it up, hands-on fixing it up, and sold that for a very nice profit after 6 years. And then also went on to, buy some other farms and built a power center anchored by Target when I was still in my mid-20s, and started an office park. I had learned that an insurance company was buying another corner of the interchange, and so I decided to go out and try to grab the other corner of the interchange while I was still very young, 25, and I was successful tying that land up and getting an office park started there, and then some apartments behind that and some retail. So I did all that in college, undergraduate school. Then I got the master's program, got a master's in real estate through the #1 school here at UW-Madison. And just kept baby steps, building from there. Did a 1-story building, then a 2-story building, and then 4-story, and eventually got up to 8 stories. So I just baby stepped it all the way up, little at a time, learning as I went along. I would do things like, I didn't know anything about construction. So when I would gonna meet with the contractor, I had my friend who was in the construction major, department, and he would take me out and we'd tour the building under construction, and I'd write down all his notes, and then I would show up the next day for my construction meeting, somewhat knowledgeable. And the owner of the contractor admitted years later, he couldn't figure out how I knew so much about construction when I was only 25.
That's funny.
And I told him I cheated. I had my friend telling me.
That's funny.
And so that's how I did it. I tried to learn, do everything hands-on.
Let me ask you a question, which is this professor that was famous that you learned under. What was his like? What was the main thesis that he taught, and does it still hold up today?
Yes, yeah, actually, it all came true. Back then, it was just stocks and bonds, right? And nobody, none of the institutions invested in real estate. And his primary thesis, if you want to call it that, was that real estate should be an equal class along with stocks and bonds as an investment, something you should invest in and hold in your portfolio, whether you're a pension fund, a corporation, institution, whatever. And that became very true. You got to understand that Graskamp had polio when he was 17, and he was a quadriplegic. So, he he would
Wow.
turn, he had the students gave him a double-sided pencil with two erasers on both ends, and he would, turn the pages of his book with his mouth.
Wow.
And, because he couldn't use his arms or his legs and was in a wheelchair, but had this incredible mind, and we practically worshiped him. I mean, he's
Yeah.
very well known throughout the country in the alumni network. It's called the Grass Camp Real Estate Center today.
Wow.
And just incredible brain in terms of thinking about real estate, analyzing real estate, teaching how to do a pro forma. Remember, this is when computers just came out, so we were just getting computers into the School of Business. It's very early on, so it was all new, right? It was all new.
Yeah.
And everything he taught came to be true. I mean, institutions hold a lot of real estate today.
Right. Huh. That is incredible. Tell me this. What are some of the big lessons you've learned during your career?
Boy, yeah, that's a tough one. One is, I think the number one is just persistence. I would say people always say that about me. I'm just very persistent. When you grow up the 10th of 11 children, you become very persistent. You gotta fight.
That's like Ben Franklin. I think he was
Yes.
like, I don't know, 14 or 15 or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you gotta fight to survive. You gotta be persistent. You can't. My saying is that when you're talking to cities, that no means maybe, maybe means yes, and you're never going to get a yes. So don't go home depressed that you didn't get a yes, because you're never going to get a yes. And so you just have to stay at it, be persistent, keep plugging away. I always say, plant the seed and let it germinate. Sometimes I'll plant a seed, an idea with the city staff, and I'll let that thing just germinate for 2 to 3 years, and eventually they'll come around. It's their idea suddenly, and then they want to do it. So it just takes patience, but at the same time, consistent pounding away at the goal, to get there and not giving up and just taking the baby steps. A lot of my friends try to take giant leaps. They wanted big deals, only big deals, right? They would say, and well, they didn't get very far in life. They constantly failing at getting big deals,
Right.
But if you take a lot of little steps, you're going to get to your goal sooner or later,
Right. So, how about, the gyrations of the real estate market and, how you have had to be flexible, and, focus on kind of different aspects of real estate?
Yeah, I'm kind of a contrarian. I always say I always need a good recession. I mean, I love to start new construction in the deepest part of a recession, because I get great pricing on construction. I'm not the guy who's going to plow ahead at the beginning of a recession and try to, develop my way through it. That doesn't exist, So I'm all about, I have an economics degree, so I always since high school, college, I've watched the economic statistics, and have been able to anticipate, certain changes in the economic cycles. For example, when the Fed says, we're going to raise interest rate, well, I believed them, and I went out and we refinanced everything we could, and locked in the 2.5% to 3% interest rates for 5 or 6 or 7 years,
Right.
and we're sitting pretty now because of that. And now we're waiting out. During COVID, we didn't develop, we stopped. We don't rely on development fees. So I don't take cash out of projects at the beginning like other developers do. We contribute all of our entitlement services as an ownership interest in the property, but we do not take out any development fees at all, ever. And that's something that benefits the investors. Our investors like that. They appreciate that. We're rowing the boat in the same direction.
Sure.
If I'm getting paid, they're getting paid. If
Yeah.
they're not getting paid a current return, I'm not getting paid a current return.
Right.
So I'm highly motivated.
Great.
What can we do to
Yeah.
pivot and make that happen? What do we need to change? Don't sit around and wait and cry about the world. You constantly have to be readjusting in this business. Just like, stock market advisors are constantly readjusting, right? You have to be anticipating and changing your approach, and making sure that the properties are doing well, performing, cash flowing. And that's one reason why we stick to the cream of the crop. You know, our customers are the cream of the crop. They're the highest rent paying tenants. We don't do student housing. We don't do the low income housing. We don't do anything else other than the higher end of the market. So because I like to build a quality product, you know, our product is no question about it. It's higher quality than all the other developers that I know of. Uh, you know, we insulate the walls inside the units. We put in sound insulating mats on the floors. We use thicker LVP. We do ice makers. We do glass stove tops. I can go through a whole litany of things, but it's truly a higher quality product in terms of the construction quality, the amenities, the benefit, the features that we have, and then the customer service. It's all about customer service. So I always,
Before you go there, Terrence,
yeah.
let me ask you one question, which is,
Mhm.
because you develop to such a high extent, does it hurt your margins because you're putting more into the buildings?
In theory, you'd say, well, on paper it could, but it doesn't because one, we actually get higher rents. So when I was previously developing office, I always said, all of our advertising should have people in it because it's all about creating places where people interact. I like to sell the value of being in with other people in our office buildings when we used to do those. We don't do that now. We do multifamily. But I
Right.
always got higher rents than the other developers, and they could never figure it out. They could never understand that. But it's about a quality product. We had a coffee shop inside the first floor of the office building. So when you walked in, you hit the coffee shop on your way upstairs. Same with our apartment buildings. We have golf simulators. Other developers don't. We have hot tubs. We have which some of them don't. So everything we do is about quality. I'm not interested in doing a low quality product.
Right.
And
Right.
I think that speaks to why we get really good. We get good margins. To be honest, we get good rents. I mean, there's no question about that.
Yeah. No, that's great.
It's
I mean,
high rent.
talk to me about T-wall, in the sense that, um, talk to me about your DNA or your fingerprint on T-wall and what sets it apart from other developers.
Sure. And just on that prior question, I'll throw in also that in many of these communities, they actually call me. And when I go to those communities, whether it's Wausau or Oshkosh, et cetera, they give us free land. They give us TIF. It's an upfront grant of money. So free land and TIF. That also speaks to the margin, right? Helps underwrite the cost of the project. Okay, what's my footprint? My fingerprint is I like to build communities. So I'm not just out there building an apartment building. I'm building a multi-phased community where people are going to live for a long time. This isn't just like the old generations where you might live in an apartment for 3 to 5 years. These people are in there. They're in there for 10, 15 years. Some of them are in for life.
The home. It's
It's
really
a home, right? And so higher ceilings, build higher ceilings, wider hallways. It's more like condominium style. Much better quality. They want to live there. The amenities, the interaction, we program so we get people to interact. When we did Middleton Center here, where our office is, I bought some houses next door, tore those down, and I built a little town square for the city, and talked them into supporting that. And now today we have a town square out front, and we have every week there's events there. Thousands of people come downtown to my town square that now is a public amenity to interact and to enjoy the whatever movie night, jazz night, theater night, whatever.
Yeah.
So we do more than just build an apartment building. I love building community. I love seeing at our community of Bishops Bay, I love seeing the school bus go through and pick up the kids in the morning. That happened because we built a nice community for them that attracted them to that area. And now they're living there and their kids are growing up there and they're playing in the park that we created and on the equipment that we installed. And, it's way more than just about, building a building. But that all speaks to this is why people want to rent from us. They want to live in our communities. That's why. It's
Yeah.
just not it's not just another building that's generic and you can go anywhere. They really see this as a community, Right here you can go down, you're living here, you can go downstairs to the coffee shop. You can go over to Long Table for dinner, you can buy clothes at Journeyman, on the retail. Some of the buildings have retail if they're in the downtown area. So that just brings everybody together. You know what I mean?
Right. And one thing I'm hearing from you is that by doing such a great job, by having such a high standard of what you're building, in a way, you're marketing to these towns and cities so that they'll want you in there to do this
Yes.
great job.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Wausau called us because they needed the downtown mall was defunct, completely empty, and they needed to tear it down and get redevelopment. And they didn't know what to do. You know, same thing with Oshkosh. They had a blighted zone right on the river. Now we're on the river right next to Lake Winnebago. I love being near water, river, lakes, or a park to overlook a park. So yes, they want us, and so they're willing to give us that free land, the TIF. You know, let us do a quality job, and we really have a big impact on their community. I'm the #1 taxpayer in the city of Middleton. You know, I took an area that had a tax base of 4.5 million and took it to over $80 million tax base. You know,
Wow.
that has a big difference on the city, you know,
Yeah.
financially, a small town. So it's a big impact.
Tell me about, so just sticking with this theme, tell me a little bit about Gridiron, Tribeca, some of these other master plan communities.
Sure. Um, Gridiron, I don't know if we have a master plan on Gridiron. Yeah, there we go. So up in Green Bay, you know, home of the Packers, uh, right, one interchange away from the Lambeau Field. We acquired an old, we're doing quite a bit of this now. We're acquiring old insurance company buildings. Well, no, they're not old actually. They're fairly new on some of these times, but
Right.
these people have been sent to work from home. The buildings are vacated. You know, the company needs to sell it. They sell it for pennies on the dollar. I mean, this site was $120 million of value in terms of land and building. We got it for $4.5 million. The village is giving us TIF. They want to see this redeveloped because this was their primary tax base that
Right.
supported their, you know, subsidized their single family homes.
Sure.
So they want to get some more new commercial tax base going. So we've created a new community with a lot of multifamily, some townhomes because they wanted some of those. Along the highway, we have the option of doing either hotels or apartments or office. And then we have 2 retail buildings right near the entrance. Um, and the beauty of this is we inherited all the infrastructure. It's all in place. You know, the internal road network is there. We don't have to spend any money on that. And what we did was create a really unique investment opportunity, which I call it the holding company investment or legacy investment, which is you're investing for a legacy. You're investing not just for yourself, but your children, your grandchildren, you know, could pay their college tuition. Um, because instead of investing just one building, which you still have the option to do, you invest in the holding company for this project. And the holding company will take a 30% interest in every building. We're going to contribute the land down. Holding company is going to take back a 30% interest. So if you invest once in the holding company, you get a slice of every phase. And we're going to have in that Gridiron project, we're going to have at least 24 buildings. There might be some lots we sell off maybe to a hotel, but we'll have lots of multifamily, we'll have the retail. Um, and this is going to be a legacy opportunity to invest once and, uh, you know, have it for your family for a long, long time. And as distributions flow up from the different buildings, the different phases, the holding company will then issue a distribution. There is some provisions that if you need to get out, you could do that down the road on a limited basis. You know, the number of people's limited per year. But this is what I invented is this legacy investing where you invest once and now you've got a slice of every phase. So it's incredible value for the investor to have this structure. So we're just starting off this year, trying it out and see how people like it.
And so one of the advantages, it seems to me, is that you give diversification, and so you de-risk. I mean,
Right.
is that fair?
Yeah. You're not invested just heavily into one building. You'll be
Right.
invested in multiple phases, and you also get first dibs if we do need cash, which may, you know, would be unlikely in this project, but because we have low cost land and we have TIF. But if we did need cash in a phase, you get first dibs if you want to put some into that one phase. But
Yeah.
yeah, this is you're going to be diversified amongst all the buildings there over time. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Great. Hey, This might be a little forward, but I was just curious, have you followed some of the provisions in the big beautiful bill as it relates to real estate?
I've been trying to, but it changes so often, but now it's done.
Well, one of the
So
things they talk
yeah.
about is opportunity zones and opportunity zones as it relates to rural communities. And I'm just curious, I mean, based on where you are, where you're at, if you think that could be advantageous for you.
We looked into that, opportunity zones, and the deadline is coming up next year, and I don't know if they extended the deadline
They
of the building.
did.
Okay.
They extended. Yeah.
Yeah. But what people don't understand, like Wausau, our Wausau investment is an opportunity zone investment. The challenge there is that if somebody's reinvesting their gain, right, in to avoid or defer the taxes, that they still have to pay the taxes at some point here. I think it's whatever they extended to. Was
Sure.
it 2028 or something like that?
Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't
I'm
remember.
not positive. I don't want to.
But my point is, they still have to pay the taxes at that date. And so now they're illiquid in the sense of they invested the cash, it's illiquid, but now the taxes come due. So
Right.
there is a challenge there. And I just want to be, I always try to be very upfront with investors about that. It's like 1031 exchanges. Yeah, you could invest through a 1031 exchange, but when you do that and you have no basis, let's say you used up all your depreciation, your investment now has no basis. You don't get any new depreciation. Whereas
Right.
if you go ahead and just pay the taxes at the low capital gains rates we have today and reinvest, you get all the tax money back because you get it back through depreciation. You're gonna have a new
Right.
basis. And so you get it all back. So
Yeah.
why keep digging your hole deeper? I always tell people, bite the bullet, pay the tax and then reinvest and capture it all back. Um, so there's some misnomers going on out there, but it's all about, I think it's all about the practical side of investing. And um, the big advantage of real estate is that depreciation to offset other passive income you might have from stocks or bonds or other real estate. Plus, you get the appreciation of the investment increasing in value over time. And then you get the distributions. Once it starts cash flowing, then we do distributions quarterly based on cash flow. So there's a lot of benefits to real estate that you won't get in a stock or a bond. And it's a real asset. What I mean? Land, I've never seen land go to zero in value, what I mean? Like a stock can. It's always
Sure.
going to have some value. And when you're investing with us, we are, as I said, we don't take out any development fees up front or at any time. And we put our contribution in, it stays in. You get benefit of the TIF, you get the benefit of the low land value. We aren't marking it up or doubling it and then putting it in. We're putting it in at what it costs and you're getting that benefit. Um, and then I'll add some, mortgage, construction loan, to build it. We lease it up, stabilize it, and then it starts cash flowing and we'll start issuing distributions based on the cash flow.
Right. So, you're an incredibly impressive person, but I mean, if you were to say to someone, why should they invest in T-Wall? Why do you think they should invest in T-Wall?
Well, I think the primary reason is because we're all in the boat rowing in the same direction together. That does make us quite unique. All the other developers I know are taking out fees. They're in it for they're fee developers. That's their MO, and that's fine. They're not in it for the cash flow. I support myself off the cash flow from the investments, from my share of the ownership. I'm not supporting myself based on fees from the properties. So that my motivation is the same as an investor's. That's extremely unusual.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. We have a bunch of audience questions, so I'm going to ask Callie to come on and let's give them a chance.
Okay, thank you very much. So what's the occupancy and rent growth history of your projects, and how do you benchmark against market comps?
Sure. The rent growth will vary. I would say historically, we've had consistent, no question about it, 3% increases per year consistently for 40, 50 years, in this market. There was a couple of years here recently where we were able to increase rents between 9 and 29%, depending on the property. That was unusual. I wouldn't hold that out there as a typical thing. And that was because, you want to anticipate future interest rate increases when you do refinancing, and the market is very tight. The Dane County Madison market in particular, and a lot of these markets that I'm in, there's a housing shortage in these markets. And so they're desperate for housing of all kinds. And this allows us to increase rents, consistently. We try to not to be jerky about it. We try to be consistent and stepping them up on a regular basis every year, a certain percent, 2 to 3% a year is a real number you could count on,
Thank you. And how do you mitigate risks tied to rising interest rates, labor shortages, and material cost volatility?
Sure. So when interest rates started coming up, what do we do? One is we refinanced everything, locked in the lower rate as long as we could on each particular property. But what I did was something that my banker said no other developer was doing or has done. And that is that I looked out 3, 4, 5, 6 years with the refinancings coming up in the future. And I said, okay, with a higher interest rate, if we're going to go from say 3% to 7 or something, or 6.5, at that time, 3 years from now or 2 years from now, how much increase in debt service and debt coverage ratio, and what does that translate to in a rent increase per unit per year until that time frame comes? And so I was anticipating what the rate increase would be, and then getting those rent increases on a regular basis, so we didn't get to the end where you didn't have to have a hockey stick like the office developers are doing. They're refinancing, and then they find that their interest rate's 2.5 times, 3 times higher, and they're not going to get the rents because they can't increase the rents. They're locked up by leases. At least in apartments, we can increase those every year. And so I was anticipating that and planning ahead. And then what was the other part of the question?
The how do you benchmark against market comps?
Oh, yeah. Well, we always seem to be at the highest end of the rent level, because we have the highest quality product and more amenities, and we are always looking at other, competing properties. What are they doing? We do not use these automated rent comparison programs that you can have in, say, Appfolio or Rent Manager or Yardi. And the reason is because they're antitrust, and it is likely that there's going to be some lawsuits from the government against developers who do that, who use those. So we just do it ourselves. We'll look out in the marketplace, and we have our property managers go out and visit the other properties, and benchmark against them. Let me say it this way, I'm not trying to be arrogant, but others are benchmarking against us because we're the highest rent, we're the highest quality. So we set the standard and they benchmark against us. If I benchmark, I'm benchmarking against somebody who has a lower standard product, lesser quality building, and maybe they're a little bit lower rent. They're going for a different tenant. That's fine. There's plenty of room here. There's lots of growth here in these markets, housing shortage. So, all's good, right?
And how do you ensure alignment between the interests of your team and outside investors, especially over longer project timelines?
Well, I always make sure that our team is aware of and knowledgeable. We've got investors. We have about 850 investors currently, and that we're doing this for them. That we have to be thinking about the distributions. You can't just wake up one day and say, "Oh, we're gonna go do this major capital improvement." No, you have to plan ahead, have reserves set aside, each year, and anticipate and budget, because you have to make sure your distributions are still gonna, be there for your investors. You don't want to say, "Well, we'll just do this big expense, and well, if we don't have distribution, well, then that's the way it is." No, the investor comes first, then we figure that out. But we set aside reserves every year in these properties for capital improvements to help sort of smooth that out, So our distributions can also be consistent. You know, once we start, we don't like to we don't like to suspend them. We don't like to lower them, right? We want to make them sustainable on a regular basis. So all of our employees, all of our team know that, it's all about having good cash flow. It's all about the investors. We have an annual investor meeting and they attend that. So they get to meet the investors and see these are real people.
And why do you think this is a good time to develop so many new units?
Well, I wouldn't say so many new units. I mean, we've got a demand in these markets that's exceeding the supply every year right now. It is a challenging time, I will say that, to develop because construction costs have gone up. Now, fortunate for us, we're at the higher end of the market, so we're able to raise the rents, get the higher rents on new product, and we're able to offset some costs with TIF and free land or low-cost land. We're doing a project on the east side of Madison. We had to buy the land, but it was farmland pricing, and the infrastructure's right there. So we bought it for pennies on the dollar rather than a platted improved site. And we do the platting, we do the zoning, and we get the entitlements. So we're making that investment, and that's my investment, right? So these markets are really good right now. That's not always true. During COVID, we waited. I suspended, I pushed back projects. I didn't develop in the 2008, 2012 Great Recession. I was the first developer. People thought I was nuts. I said, I'm stopping development, suspending development. We're going to wait a year or two. Let's see how this goes. And then in 2010, in the depth of the recession, I was the first developer to say, let's start building. This is it. Let's go. Because it's going to take a year to build it. We want it to open when the recession is over. And we did. We got great pricing for construction. We opened as everything started improving in the economy, filled up. Now we have low-cost units that are low cost forever. Other developers, like there are two projects around here that built, and they paid extremely high prices for their lumber, extremely high, because they just insisted on breaking ground when the lumber prices were sky high. Well, now they're stuck with that cost basis way up here, and I'm down here. And that's not a good idea. I mean, you have to be flexible and, anticipate what's going on, make good decisions about the timing of when you start, when you're going to open. You don't just plow ahead blindly. I mean, when commodity prices were sky high, I just waited because we're not under pressure. We're not trying to earn development fees to pay for this big overhead, right? We're not under that pressure. We don't take development fees. So we survive off of the property management income, and then I survive off of the, my income from the investments.
Thank you. And what steps are you taking to incorporate sustainability and green building practices?
Sure. I can honestly say I'm the number one green developer. I'm glad somebody always asks this, which is great. But I'm the number one green sustainable developer in the state, if not the Midwest. I'm told we have the largest solar array on an apartment building east of the Mississippi River. I'm the only developer to have received the Governor's Award for energy efficiency. We trained Focus on Energy, which is the nonprofit that trains developers how to do all of the green and sustainable things. We trained them so they could train the other developers. And as a result of doing that, they paid half the salary of my engineer for 5 years because he was spending so much time and I was spending so much time showing them how to do these things. So I created the first, I swear, I'm not making this up. I created the first sustainable development course at a university in the world here at the UW. I taught that course. I created it and I taught it at the UW. And that was the first ever in the world. So we do a lot of firsts on green and sustainable issues. We have a natural burial preserve over here in our Bishop's Bay development. There's a site that was an old quarry, so it wasn't compacted when it was filled, so you couldn't put a house or buildings on it. So it could either be a park, but my daughter actually had the idea of doing a natural burial cemetery. I'm like, this is a great idea. And she got us the certification and she took the initiative and she made it happen. And now we have a green cemetery there as part of our overall development, and it'll be a park when it's all done someday. So we do a lot of innovative things. You know, I got the bike path built around the north side of our lake here, which, you know, for 50 years, some reason, all the different governments couldn't get together to do that. And I did it by divide and conquer. I just went to each separately and got them to each promise to do their section, even though they wouldn't talk to each other. Seems childlike, but that's how it was. And we got it built. Now there's a bike path around the north side of the lake. So a lot of things that we do that are unique. You know, we did geothermal. I think we were the first to do a private geothermal system in Dane County, in our county here. But lots of green and sustainable stuff. Yes.
Thank you. And what do you think investors keep coming back? What do they value most about partnering with you?
Well, I think they obviously want to get a return, you know, that's consistent and regular. They do understand they're not going to get a distribution during construction and during the lease-up period. But they like, you know, the regular consistent distribution. They've gotten, when we have exited and we have sold, or we did a buyout in some cases, you know, so I could own the property eventually, you know, 100%, but most of the time we'll sell. They've gotten big returns. You know, we've had most of the returns are in the 20% range, cash on cash per year. We've had City Deck in Green Bay was 31% per year, cash on cash. So these are not IRRs, because IRRs can be manipulated, you know, but a cash on cash return can't be manipulated. This is the real McCoy here. So they know they've gotten big returns when we've sold, and they can recycle their capital. They get to pick and choose which property they want to invest in. They love the idea that they can kick the tires and they tell their friends and family, hey, I'm an owner of that. I'm an owner of that, you know. And it's a real community they're part of. They see the effect it has on the communities when they're there. So yeah, I mean, it's all of those things, I think.
Great. And last question is, it sounds like a great investment opportunity. And what size checks are you looking for?
So we'll have, you can invest in a couple different ways. You can take common stock in the LLC, which would be a minimum 25,000. And then that's the minimum investment. You have to be accredited, of course. And then, excuse me, dry throat here. We also have a preferred interest where it's just get a 12% fixed return. So you don't have to worry about any, you know, in terms of what are you going to get? There's no uncertainty. And then we have a premium preferred, I'm sorry, the preferred, you have to do a minimum $250,000 investment. The premium preferred is a minimum 1 million. That's an 18% return. Again, it's a fixed amount. And that allows you, again, not to have to worry about what you're getting. And it's also costing us less to collect one investor $1 million rather than collect 40 investors at 25,000. So it all depends on which fits you better, right? You want to do what fits you better, or your family. And we have an investor portal, so you get all your information. It's recorded and retained. Every distribution you get is put on there, and you can get everything, you know, constantly. You can look at it 24/7. You get to see all your different investments. It's really great info. If you want to come in here, we got one person who comes in here and he wants to look at the general ledger every 6 months. I'm like, okay, fine, go ahead. You know, we're open, we're transparent, nothing to hide here. You can go back to that other slide. Dylan, you can email him and he'll get you some info if you have interest in a particular project. We have, like, our holding company opportunities. We have one at Green Bay. We have one here in Greater Madison where we're buying the QBE Insurance Company property, 136 acres. We're getting it for pennies on the dollar. We'll probably have 27 apartment buildings there, we estimate, plus some retail sites that will land lease. Again, in terms of community, we're going to sell a site for a church, sell a site for daycare. We'll have a clubhouse, fitness center. So creating a real community there, but that's going to be also fantastic holding company investment. We have one over here in Middleton on the west side. the 8 buildings right on the Beltline. Most of them multifamily, possibly 1 hotel that we would partner with or sell that site. So you get to pick and choose what's best for you, what fits your situation best. You can invest either in cash or you can do an IRA. We can set that up, and we can answer questions individually through email or just call me. My number is 608-345-0701, or send your request to Dylan, and we'll get information out to you.
Great, that's fantastic. So that concludes the questions for the audience. Another way to get in touch with them, everyone out there has my email address. I'm happy to facilitate an introduction to you all. And in turn, they'll have all of your information as well. Terrence, I do want to turn it back over to you for final words before we close out.
Well, thank you. I just want to thank you and Callie and Force family for setting this up. You've all been fantastic for making these connections, and we're growing, and we're needing more investors because we have more projects now as we've continued to grow. We have 10 in the pipeline this year. Over the next 20 years, we have literally 10,000 units in the pipeline on properties that we control that are approved, or in case of the QBE property about to be approved. So it's a long-term pipeline. So if you want to invest, you can think about this as not just a one-time deal, but if you want to do more in the future, you're able to do that, and you get first dibs in doing that. So you're tapping into a really good pipeline here. That's going to be a long-term opportunity. So, but we love what we're doing, and we got a great team. They're all hardworking. I couldn't do it without a really good team of people, many of whom have been with us a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Terrence and Steve, and everyone have a great day.